Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. We're here with Dr. Nomi Prins of Prinsights Global. Nomi, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. Nice to see you.
You're welcome. I love our talks. Okay, let's start out macro. What is your macro view of the world economy and financial markets today?
Well, right now, of course, there's a lot of volatility because the world always looks at what's going on in Iran now, or at least certainly in the last few months, how that impacts oil, how that impacts inflation, how that impacts what the Fed might do, the dollar might do, and so forth. The reality is we've seen oil come down from its spikes of 138 down to the 70 to 80 level. And what we're also seeing is that any news of, whether it's a tanker being torpedoed at, or whether it is the Trump administration either agreeing or not agreeing, or Iran agreeing or not agreeing to some sort of a cease agreement or truce, oil is starting to not care. And what that means is we are going to see inflation start to come down in the next CPI and PPI prints, which means that we're going to see, if not the FOMC meeting in July, but certainly the one after that, start to walk back some of the language that's scared a lot of the markets and the headlines about inflation last go around, or when he first came into that position in May. And we're going to see some of that trending down. So we won't see inflation to 2% level. We haven't seen that in years, but we will see it coming down and reducing the fear in the market of being higher. And what that means is some of the commodities markets that have traded off because of that fear of higher inflation, like gold, like silver, and we've already started to see this happen, are going to start to create up to where they were going to be before all of this started.
Okay, so you see the CPI coming down, but commodity prices continually ticking up.
Well, yes, and particularly commodities that have been hit because of the narrative that high inflation hurts gold, because high inflation should mean you should buy treasuries, even though they actually underperform gold over time.
Yeah.
And similar with silver. We've seen a lot of sort of fear-based paper trading in some of those commodities where there is a big paper market, like silver and like gold.
Yeah.
On the flip side, we've seen commodities like copper, which has historically been considered an economic indicator because copper is used in every industry to wire everything. And we've seen copper reach highs, and historic highs of around 671 per pound, even while oil was still high. And now copper is a bit back below that, but it's not like it's dived back down. It's just kind of in a slightly lower range, but creeping back up. But it's pretty much stayed very, very solid relative to, say, gold or silver. And what that means to me is, in general, the end users of actual commodities have not stopped buying. They're not selling what they have. In fact, what they're doing is they're locking in longer term contracts to make sure they have the supply to build what it is they need to build, or to electrify what it is they need to electrify. And that's why we've seen a lot of these base and industrial metals hold in or appreciate over this period. So to me, that's a counter inflation fear indicator, which is much stronger than inflation might be rising because oil was rising and therefore gold and silver were trading off. So it's a really interesting bifurcation of commodities. I expect gold and silver to go back up, or at least to start to move upward relative to that. I expect copper to continue to creep upward because it's always held in there. And the other interesting commodity is uranium.
Yeah.
Uranium's been pretty much not moving at all at a higher average level over the last couple of years, which is $85 per pound. But the utility companies are buying it and creating forward contracts to have it for the future at $95 to now $100 a contract. So there's a gap between an $85 spot price, very little paper markets. No one was trading uranium down because, the Fed might raise rates by a certain amount. No one was touching uranium. No one knew how that relationship actually worked in the paper markets, and they weren't deep enough anyway to do that. But the uranium shares in mining companies, the uranium actually did underperform. They just went out with the stocks.
Yeah.
So there's some tremendous opportunity in uranium miners and copper prices, and in buying back silver and gold and the right developers of those commodities that the market has just given us. The world has just basically presented to us because of the volatility that Iran has caused.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've noticed the same thing. The spot price is at 85. The cheapest term contracts last month were 95.50. So essentially, you can kind of somewhat see the future in that, okay, it's going to be $10 more a pound minimum a year from now.
Not even a year from now. A lot of those contracts are they're basically contracts that are being signed now for future uranium. So what's happening now, that's a $10 to $12 premium over spot.
Yeah.
Usually it's about a $15 premium over spot, and then spot catches up to the premium. So the fact that spot has only been $10 and we're getting a $95 future contract, probably means that future contract by the end of the year is going to creep up to 100, 105, and spot's going to start to catch it up as it does.
Okay.
And then again, the producers of uranium have really underperformed this entire price action.
Yeah.
And so that's where the actual value is as an investor, looking some of the domestic and Canadian uranium companies that have really just underperformed this entire behavior, and recognize that we think in the second half of the year those companies are going to have tremendous upsides.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I agree. I'm literally betting on it.
Yeah. Same. And that's how we have our portfolios positioned as well on Prinsights. I mean, we very specifically see that path clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was talking with Justin Hune recently, and he sees, generally speaking, during the summer, there's kind of a pullback in uranium. Not always, but more
Yeah.
often than not. And so I think this might be a little buying window, and it sounds like you feel the same.
Yeah, because uranium hasn't actually. The interesting thing is usually uranium pulls back. Now it's not done anything. It's just kind of staying in a very, very, very tight range.
Yeah.
Spot is, futures going up a little bit. They'll start to move, but those miners have really just not gone up. They've gone down recently. And also, we're talking about uranium. You're following uranium. We follow uranium very closely. But in the overall atmosphere of headlines in sort of major news,
Yeah.
it's all about oil.
Yeah.
No one's like, well, nuclear power is basically providing 20% of the electrification in the entire United States of America, and every country is trying to lock in future uranium and processed uranium production and supply. And nobody's talking about that. We're talking about, do we need Iran to stop, producing nuclear weapons if that's what they're doing? That's a whole separate conversation that's going on. No one's talking about who's enriching uranium and where, and how that's something that's in short supply in the West.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you mentioned before on the paper market for gold and silver, and then the physical market. I feel like there might be a little disconnect there. What can you expand on that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the bigger disconnect we can actually see in the silver market. In the silver market, and they're both kind of doing the same thing, but silver's doing it more because silver is historically more volatile than gold, but it's also more needed for industrial uses than gold. So the actual supply of silver coming out of the ground per year right now is about 820 million ounces of silver. Every single silver mining company that produces real silver for real use has not had one single iota of stoppage in the demand from end users and industries that actually need silver to continue to build data centers, infrastructure projects, what have you. Everything moves immediately. So the real demand side of the silver equation, rock solid. What we've seen, though, is silver prices come down. Why? Because, again, there's been those inflation scares. It's very volatile, but also it has a very, very large paper market. And by that, I'll just give you one example, one piece of it. Right, if we look at the SLV ETF, right, the largest silver ETF, allegedly every share is actually representing 0.9 ounces of silver, so it's not quite a one-to-one relationship, but suppose there's silver somewhere that's backing every part of this ETF. 25 to 50 million shares of that thing get traded a day on average.
I didn't know that.
That's just one silver ETF. Not only that, so if you multiply that out, that's about 5 billion ounces worth of silver per year getting just traded. Again, 820 million are coming out of the ground. So right then and there, you will have a disconnect in the behavior, both on the downside and the upside of those relationships. When we had that major sell-off in silver in the end of June, 50 million ounces were trading hands over those days. So it was a double volume, which would have equated to $10 billion annual of silver compared to 820 million out of the ground. So when that's being sold off, and when the headlines are that silver's crashing, and those exacerbate all the program trading and all the margin calls and all the AI bots that go around, and then they recreate articles that say that silver's crashing, that creates a sort of paper feedback loop, and it can happen very, very fast.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the producers that are producing and getting that silver out of the ground, again, they are seeing their demand go fast, but it's nowhere near the same amount. So we could see that exact same thing change on the upside when we have, again, this reduction of sort of fear headlines about inflation. Again, oil has come down from its highs into the $70 to $80 range. Yes, on any given one day it can spike a little bit, but we're kind of normalizing to a level that the market is somewhat comfortable with, no matter what news is coming out of Iran, give or take a few dollars, not $10 or $15 in a day. And what that means is there's going to be less momentum of a negative nature coming into the silver market. Gold is similar. Gold has a very deep paper market as well. It's just actually smaller in volume than the silver market. And that's one of the reasons we saw gold trade off as well. It's the headlines, to the program trading, to the AI, to the rinse and repeat. Once those change, we could actually see a situation where all those paper levels start to rematch back up to the trend of what's happening physically with supply and the demand on that side. So there's been a big distortion between paper and real supply and demand.
Okay.
And I expect that to be I think that is an opportunity.
Interesting. So I didn't know that that's supposedly SLV was zero point 0.9. So they're saying 90% of that, like each share is supposed to represent 0.9 of an ounce of silver.
Each share per whatever ounce it represents 0.9 of an ounce of silver. I don't exactly know how the fees and the math match up on that, but what it means is it'd be equivalent, and this doesn't happen, of if you sell that portion of the SLV, are you really taking that silver that's supposedly backing it out of that vault and like throwing it away? That's not actually happening because it's just moving so fast. It couldn't. I mean, even if it were happening, even if it could happen, it can't happen because you're talking about a phenomenal amount of volume that's actually getting out into the market on paper. You can't move that amount of silver.
But it doesn't exist. There's not that much silver in existence.
There's not that much silver in existence, number one. And even if there were a matching amount of silver, you're not calling up that vault and being like, hey, go figure out a buyer standing outside for that silver at that price. Because most of the buyers for silver are actually industrial buyers. They're actually long-term buyers, and they're actually connected to the miners when silver comes out of their plants and into what they need to use it for.
Interesting. Okay. Let's move on to the Fed and interest rates. What I watched the CME Fed Watch tool and what people are forecasting. Do you think that's it? Well, first of all, what does the market think is going to happen, and then what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the Fed Watch, I think, was at 70% level after Kevin Warsh gave his first speech, and there was all this conversation and the news about how he didn't say very much. In fact, he said that the Fed would be less forward-looking and give less forward guidance in the future. So all these articles and the market freaked out by, and assumed that just meant he was going to raise rates. I don't know why that was the assumption, but that's the assumption that basically created a higher dollar and fear of inflation and the CME, the Fed Watch tool going up and so forth. We've since seen that come down substantively. And the reason that has come down is, first of all, not much has been said since then, until we get to the next FOMC meeting at the end of the month. We'll see what is said next. But also, the absolute numbers that go into inflation, such as the higher value of oil, have actually come down. So the market's had time to process this, I think, overreaction to what rate hikes could be at the time. We wrote about this at the time, like that day. We didn't really see it as a big deal. We saw the market think it was a big deal. But we thought that eventually it would be noted that Kevin Warsh basically said nothing, and that's okay. I mean, he's coming into the position of a very powerful Fed leader or central bank leader, and he needs to somehow indicate that he's going to watch the data. I mean, it would make no sense not to. His term is going to outlast in terms of the Trump administration, President Trump. It's going to outlast a lot of potential Congress people. So he had to basically be logical, and I think he was logical. But if we start to see inflation come down because the prices that are feeding into it come down, which they are, then that actually becomes more of a dovish lack of communication than a hawkish lack of communication, and then you see the markets start to feel better about that.
So you see him lowering rates in the future? Or you think
I don't see him lowering rates this year. I don't see the FOMC lowering rates this year unless we have some sort of a situation where unemployment, which is now still 4.2, 4.3, it's not that low, but I mean, sort of plummet or something sort of very negative happen with respect to growth. I actually see them staying in a holding pattern, but wanting to find reasons to lower rates. And the reason for that, too, is the Fed's book itself has actually grown. In other words, they're not technically in a quantitative easing mode. aggressively.
Yeah.
But since they reduced, or they basically went off of quantitative tightening in December 2025 under Powell, the Fed's book has grown by $250 billion. It has not shrunk.
Yeah.
It has grown.
Yeah.
And it's still $2 trillion more than it was at the height of the financial crisis. So there's a huge quantitative easing cushion, however you define it,
Yeah.
of liquidity there at the Fed for the Treasury bond market, because no one else wants to buy the Treasury market, or at least they don't want to if they don't have to, which is why central banks now have more reserves in gold than they do of U.S. Treasury bonds.
Okay. 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 Let's say you had, okay, we're getting the signal here. We got to wrap up. Let's say you had 100% cash in your portfolio, right? You're all cash. You can allocate to gold, silver, copper, uranium, and energy and cash. What percentages of those six would you make it up? You got to place the bet right now.
Okay, let's start with absolutely 0% in cash, because there's a lot of opportunity in the other things. I would be dividing most of my money right now between, well, actually between all of them, but I would say if I had to sort of rank where there's value, I'd say uranium equities, so the mining companies that have underperformed.
Okay.
Then I would put them in copper junior developers, because there's been a big spree of big mining companies scouting for the smaller developers. Again, being very selective in which ones. This isn't arbitrary. Then I would look for pure play silver mines, the mines that have the lowest cost of production of silver relative to the highest demand for their silver in their regions. You know, things like First Majestic, things like Aya Gold and Silver, where they have ongoing very strong demand for very low cost silver production.
Okay.
And I think I'd probably put less of it in gold, but I would look again for the same reason as copper developers. I would look for good, high quality junior gold developers versus gold itself, because I think when gold does turn around and the inflation story, sort of abates because oil continues to come down, and we'll see the numbers bear that out. That gold will appreciate. We still forecast the gold to get to 6,000 by the turn of the year. We're still very bullish on silver, but again, those pure play sort of mid-level miners are where I put it. In terms of energy companies, we did allocate. 6 months ago, I would have said, look at some of those companies, but right now, I think where the value is in. If you're coming in now today, is the way I said it. So those will give you exposure to energy in a different way, particularly copper. But that's how I would allocate. I don't need to do cash or energy right now. I certainly would not do U.S. Treasury bonds.
Okay.
You didn't ask me, but I just want to make that clear.
Okay, you would not be betting on bonds. Okay, no energy, no cash. Uranium miners,
Today.
copper junior developers, pure play silver miners like Aya, and gold developers. Nomi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
If our
you so much,
viewers
Steve.
want to get a hold of you and follow your work, how can they do so?
Just head over to prinsights.substack.com. Check out our different tiers, but we make recommendations and we analyze a lot of these companies if you want to take that $100 and put it to work.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for tuning in. If you want to get the replays of the 2026 Rules Symposium, there is a link for that down below, and we'll also put Nomi's link down there as well. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy trading. For more content like this, check out these videos right here.